My brother bit into one of my cookies and made a face. Not a bad face. The face you make when something is better than you expected and you need to recalibrate your expression before anyone notices you were impressed. He chewed slowly, swallowed, and then said the thing he always said. "These are good, Lily. Really. But you can't build a life on cookies." He set the rest of the cookie down on his plate like he was closing an argument. It was Christmas dinner at my parents' house in Ridgewood, New Jersey, and Marcus had just reduced 4 years of my professional life to a sentence about baked goods. 20 family members were arranged around the extended table. My parents, David and Catherine Chen, Marcus and his wife Tanya, fresh from their recently purchased colonial in Summit that they mentioned at least once per conversation. My younger sister Becca, a second-year resident at Mount Sinai, who hadn't slept in what appeared to be several weeks. Assorted aunts, uncles, and cousins filling the remaining seats with the comfortable familiarity of people who gathered every December to eat too much and judge each other with surgical precision. I was at the end of the table, next to the kitchen door. The seat you get when you're the person nobody needs to impress and nobody expects to be impressed by. The failing little bakery they were referring to was called Flour and Fig. I'd opened it 4 years ago in a narrow storefront on a side street in Montclair, using $42,000 in savings and a sourdough starter I'd been feeding since college. From the outside, and from everything I'd told my family, it was a small neighborhood bakery. One location, a handful of employees. The kind of place that smelled wonderful and made just enough money to keep the lights on. What my family didn't know was that Flour and Fig had grown from that single storefront into a franchise operation with 47 locations across 8 states. That we'd launched a direct-to-consumer shipping line that delivered to all 50 states and 14 countries. That our retail product line was carried in 2,800 grocery stores nationwide. That we'd just been valued at $340 million in a private assessment. And that tonight, at approximately 8:20 p.m., a producer from the Food Network was going to call my phone to finalize the details of a $12 million franchise expansion deal that would be featured as the centerpiece of their new primetime series about America's fastest growing food brands. But at this table, in this house, I was still just Lily with her little bakery. The one they worried about, the one they offered to help. Marcus was deep into his annual performance review of his own life, a tradition he approached with the same energy other people bring to competitive sports. "We closed 18 deals this year," he told the table, referencing his position as a senior associate at a commercial real estate brokerage in Manhattan. Total transaction volume of $240 million. He said the number the way some people say "I love you," with emphasis and the expectation of a specific response. My mother provided it. "That's wonderful, Marcus. We're so proud." My father nodded. "Solid year." Tanya squeezed Marcus's arm with the practiced admiration of a woman who'd learned that her husband's ego required regular maintenance. "Becca, how's the residency?" my mother asked, shifting focus to the other achiever. "Exhausting," Becca said, "but I'm learning a lot. Cardiology rotation starts in February." My mother beamed. 2 successful children. Then her eyes drifted to me, and the beam dimmed to something closer to a nightlight. "And Lily, how's the bakery? Still in that little spot in Montclair?" "Still there," I said. "Business is fine." Fine. The word my family translated as not bankrupt yet. Marcus leaned back. "Lily, I've been thinking. The bakery's been open, what, 4 years? At some point, you have to be honest with yourself about whether it's a real business or a hobby that happens to have a cash register. I took a sip of water. What makes it not a real business? Scale, he said, with the confidence of a man who'd memorized a business school textbook and mistaken it for wisdom. Revenue, growth trajectory, market position. A single bakery in Montclair with, 5 employees? That's a lifestyle business. It's not building wealth. It's treading water. My father nodded slowly. He always nodded when Marcus spoke about business. It was a reflex, like blinking. Your brother has a point, Lily. At some point, you need to think about the future. What happens if the bakery doesn't work out? Do you have a backup plan? My backup plan was a $340 million company with 47 locations. But that felt like an aggressive response to a dinner question, so I ate a piece of ham instead. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look at it, but I knew who it was. My COO, Angela Torres, had been texting me all day about the Food Network call. The network had been developing a primetime series profiling America's fastest-growing food brands, and Flour and Fig had been selected as the season premiere episode. The producers wanted to feature our expansion from a single storefront to a national franchise, and the centerpiece of the episode was the announcement of a new $12 million franchise deal that would add 22 locations in 5 new states. The call to finalize the deal was scheduled for 8:20 p.m. It was currently 7:56. The story of how I built Flour and Fig from a neighborhood bakery into a $340 million empire while my family suggested backup plans starts with a sourdough starter and a spreadsheet. I studied food science at Cornell, not culinary arts, food science, the chemistry of flavor, the physics of texture, the biology of fermentation. I graduated with a thesis on optimal sourdough fermentation temperatures that my professor called the most rigorous work he'd reviewed in 15 years. My family described this degree as Lily learning to bake, which was like describing a structural engineer as someone who stacks blocks. After Cornell, I spent 2 years working in product development at a major food conglomerate. I learned how large-scale food production worked, how distribution chains operated, how retail partnerships were structured, and how brand identity was built. Then I quit, because the company was producing food I wouldn't eat, using processes I didn't respect, and selling it to people who deserved better. Flour and Fig was built on a simple principle: artisanal quality at accessible scale. The recipes I developed used techniques from high-end pastry combined with production methods I'd engineered to maintain quality across volume. My sourdough wasn't just good because I was a skilled baker. It was good because I'd spent 6 years understanding the molecular structure of gluten development and the precise relationship between hydration, temperature, and fermentation time. The Montclair storefront was the prototype. I used the first year to perfect the recipes, the production workflow, and the customer experience. The second year, I documented every process in a franchise manual, so detailed it ran to 847 pages. The third year, I opened 5 franchise locations. They were all profitable within 4 months. By year 4, 47 locations across 8 states. The direct-to-consumer shipping line I'd launched 18 months ago was generating $28 million annually on its own. The retail products in 2,800 grocery stores added another $45 million. Total annual revenue across all channels, $186 million. The company had been valued at $340 million by 3 independent assessors, and I'd maintained my anonymity because the brand was the star. Flour and Fig's public identity was warm, artisanal, community-focused. The founder was referenced in marketing materials as a food scientist and baker from New Jersey, but no photographs, no interviews, no public appearances. Angela handled all media inquiries. The franchise operators knew me as the founder, but they'd signed NDAs that prevented public identification. My family knew I had a bakery. They just didn't know it was 47 bakeries, and a shipping company, and a grocery brand, and a $340 million enterprise. 8:05 p.m. Dessert was being served. My mother's Christmas cake, the same one she'd been making from the same recipe for 28 years. Dense, reliable, and fundamentally unspectacular. She served it with the pride of tradition and the confidence of a woman who'd never tasted what I produced daily in 47 kitchens across 8 states. Tanya was talking about their new kitchen renovation. "We're importing tile from Portugal," she said. "The contractor says it'll take 8 weeks." 8 weeks? My father repeated, shaking his head with the concern of a man who considered home improvement timelines a serious topic of conversation. I thought about the 22 new franchise locations I was about to announce. Each one required a full kitchen build-out in 6 weeks. We could do it because I'd engineered the process down to a 73-step protocol that my construction team executed with military precision. 8 weeks for tile seemed generous. My phone buzzed again. "Angela, 15 minutes. Producer is on standby. She wants to do the call live because the film crew is with her and they want to capture the moment. Also, she wants your permission to use your name publicly for the first time in the episode. This is the big one, Lily." I typed back, "Permission granted. Let's do it." She replied, 4 years of hiding, ending tonight, over Christmas ham. I put my phone away and took a bite of my mother's cake. It was fine. Not great, but fine. 8:12 p.m. Marcus was showing photos of his new kitchen to anyone who'd look. My mother was wrapping leftovers. My father was in his armchair, beginning the slow drift toward his post-dinner nap. Becca was asleep sitting upright, a skill she developed during residency. And I was eating cake, counting the minutes until the most important phone call of my career interrupted the most ordinary Christmas dinner of my life. 8:18 p.m. 2 minutes. I set down my fork. "Lily, you okay?" my mother asked. "You look distracted." "Just thinking about the bakery," I said. She smiled sympathetically. "Try not to worry too much, honey. Small businesses have ups and downs. It'll work out." "Or it won't," Marcus added from across the table, scrolling through his phone. "No shame in closing up shop and getting a real job. There's always corporate food service, catering companies, hotel kitchens, plenty of places that need someone who can bake." He said bake the way you say hobby, lightly, without weight. 8:20 p.m. My phone rang. Not buzzed, rang. The ringtone cut through the post-dinner quiet like a bell in an empty church. The screen showed the name I'd been waiting for. Sandra Bellamy, executive producer, Food Network. I could have left the room. I could have excused myself to take the call in private. I could have maintained the cover for another hour, another day, another year. But Marcus had just told me to consider hotel kitchens. And something about that, something about the casual certainty with which he'd reduced my life's work to a backup plan for someone else's menu, made me answer the phone on speaker. The tinny click of the connection engaging was the loudest sound in the room. "Lily?" Sandra's voice was warm and professional, the practiced tone of a television producer who was also being filmed. "This is Sandra Bellamy from Food Network. I'm here with the production team, and we are thrilled to officially confirm the deal. The table didn't react yet. Food Network was just a name floating in the air, unattached to anything they understood about me. Congratulations, Sandra continued. Flour and Fig's $12 million franchise expansion is officially greenlit. 22 new locations in 5 states. And I'm personally excited to announce that your brand has been selected as the season premiere of American Food Empires. We'll be telling the story of how you grew from a single storefront in Montclair to 47 locations and a $340 million valuation in 4 years. It's the most impressive growth story we've ever featured. The silence that followed wasn't silence. It was the sound of 20 people's understanding of reality being demolished and rebuilt simultaneously. Marcus's phone slipped from his hand and bounced off the table. My mother's leftover wrapping hands froze mid-fold. My father's drift toward sleep reversed so violently he nearly launched from his armchair. Becca woke up for the first time in what appeared to be days, her medical training kicking in as though someone had coded in the dining room. Tanya's mouth was open wide enough to park a small car. Sandra, I said, my voice steady. Thank you. We're ready to move forward. Can you send the final contracts to Angela tonight? Already done, Sandra said. Also, our film crew would love to start shooting at the original Montclair location on January 3rd. Is the founder available for an on-camera interview? She paused, and I could hear the smile in her voice. America is going to want to know who built this. I looked at Marcus while I answered. I'm available, I said. I'll be at the Montclair Bakery at 7 a.m., where I am every morning, because some of us actually work in our businesses instead of just talking about them at dinner. Sandra laughed. We'll see you then, Lily. Happy holidays. I hung up. The dining room was a museum of frozen expressions. 20 people arranged around a table that suddenly felt very small, staring at the woman who baked cookies. Marcus was the first to speak. His voice came out cracked, like a recording played at the wrong speed. 47 locations? $340 million, I confirmed, with a $12 million expansion deal and a primetime Food Network series. And yes, Marcus, the cookies are very good. Thank you for noticing. My mother sat down, not in a chair, on the kitchen counter, just lowered herself onto it like her legs had filed a formal resignation. You have 47 bakeries, she said. Across 8 states, I confirmed, plus a direct-to-consumer shipping operation and a retail product line in 2,800 grocery stores. Annual revenue is $186 million. But the little spot in Montclair is still my favorite. My father had fully abandoned any pretense of drowsiness. He was sitting straight up in his armchair, his reading glasses askew, his expression caught between pride and the specific embarrassment of a man who told his daughter to have a backup plan 20 minutes before a television network called to feature her empire. $186 million in revenue, Becca said, her medical brain running the numbers with clinical precision. Marcus closed $240 million in transactions this year. His total commission at standard rates would be roughly $3.6 million. She looked at me. Your bakery generates 50 times his annual income. Thank you, Becca, I said. That's the residency math skills at work. Marcus hadn't moved. His hands were flat on the table. His Portuguese kitchen tile renovation, his $240 million transaction volume, his entire identity as the family's financial success story. All of it recalibrated against a sister who'd out-earned him by a factor of 50 while he was telling her to consider hotel kitchens. "Why?" he said. The word was heavy. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because you never asked," I said. "And when you did ask, you answered for me. Little bakery, lifestyle business, not building wealth. You decided what I was before I could tell you, and then you spent 4 years confirming your own assumptions." He closed his eyes. The hotel kitchen comment. "Yeah," I said, "that one's going to stay with me." Tanya stood up and walked around the table. She stopped in front of me and did something I'd never seen from her. She extended her hand formally, like a business introduction. "I'd like to try everything on your menu," she said, "and I'd like to apologize for every time I didn't ask about your work because I assumed it wasn't worth discussing." I shook her hand. "Come to the Montclair location," I said. "I'll give you the full tasting. On the house. Though, technically, everything is on my house." My mother slid off the counter and found a chair. She was crying. Not the dramatic kind, the kind where tears just appear without permission, like a pipe that's been under pressure for too long. "I brought you cookies," I said gently. "Every Christmas for 4 years. I brought you the product of a $340 million company, and you used them as coasters for your coffee cups." She laughed through her tears. "They are really good cookies." "They're the best cookies in the country," I said. "Food Network agrees." My father found his way out of the armchair and walked toward me. He stood in front of me for a moment, looking at me the way you look at something you've had in your house for years and suddenly realize is a masterpiece. "I told you to have a backup plan," he said. "I built the plan, the backup, and the building they're both in," I replied. He hugged me, the kind of hug that contains an apology, a recalculation, and 30 years of missed questions, all compressed into a single embrace. "I should have asked," he whispered. "Every parent should ask," I said, instead of assuming. The rest of the evening transformed. Marcus sat next to me for 2 hours, asking questions about franchise operations, supply chain management, production scaling, not from a place of competition, from genuine curiosity. The man who'd spent years explaining business to me was suddenly, quietly, learning it from me. Becca wanted to know about the food science. She'd been a chemistry minor before medical school, and the molecular biology of sourdough fermentation lit something up in her that residency had dimmed. We talked about gluten structure for 40 minutes while the rest of the family processed their collective recalibration. My mother sat beside me and held my hand through most of it, occasionally squeezing when a new detail emerged that widened the gap between what she'd believed and what was real. The filming began on January 3rd. Sandra's crew spent 3 days at the Montclair location, capturing the morning bake, the customer interactions, the precise choreography of a kitchen I'd designed to produce 4,000 units of bread daily while maintaining the quality of a single hand-shaped loaf. They filmed me in the kitchen at 5 a.m., hands deep in dough, the same hands Marcus had once described as not building wealth. They filmed Angela walking through the franchise operations center, showing the systems that coordinated 47 locations across 8 states. They filmed the shipping facility in Edison, where 12,000 packages per week went out to customers in all 50 states and 14 countries. The episode aired 6 weeks later. My parents hosted a viewing party. The entire family gathered in the same living room where Marcus had told me to consider hotel kitchens. They watched in stunned, proud silence as the Food Network told the story of a food scientist who'd built one of the fastest-growing food brands in America from a single storefront and a sourdough starter she'd been feeding since college. The narrator called it the most impressive food business origin story in the series. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours of airing, our website crashed from traffic. Angela had the tech team working through the night to scale the servers. Direct-to-consumer orders tripled in a single week. 14 new franchise applications arrived before the episode's first commercial break. By the end of the month, we had a waiting list of 200 potential franchise operators. The grocery retail side exploded too. 3 major chains that had been in preliminary discussions fast-tracked their contracts. Our retail products went from 2,800 stores to 4,100 within 60 days. The wholesale team hired 12 new people just to manage the inbound requests. The press coverage wrote itself. Every food publication, every business magazine, every morning show wanted the story. The bakery owner whose family told her to get a real job. The food scientist who turned sourdough into $340 million. The woman Food Network called the most impressive founder they'd ever profiled. I did a handful of interviews, enough to establish the brand's public identity, not enough to make it about me instead of the bread. Angela handled the rest. She'd been doing it for 4 years. She was better at it than any PR firm we could have hired. Marcus watched the entire episode without saying a word. When it ended, he stood up, walked to the kitchen, and came back holding one of my cookies from the plate I'd brought. He took a bite. A real bite. Not the dismissive taste and discard of Christmas dinner. A full, honest, appreciative bite. "These aren't just good," he said. He looked at me with eyes that had finally recalibrated. "These are a $340 million empire, and I spent 4 years calling them cookies." "Yes," I said, "you did." He took another bite. "Can I invest?" "I'll think about it," I said. The 22 new franchise locations opened over the following 6 months. Every single one was profitable within 90 days. The Food Network series generated a 400% increase in website traffic and tripled our direct-to-consumer orders. Forbes profiled the company 3 months after the episode aired. The headline called Flour and Fig the most quietly built food empire in America. My mother cut out the article and framed it. She hung it in the kitchen, right above the counter where she'd been sitting when her legs gave out on Christmas night. Next to it, she taped a small handwritten note that visitors always stopped to read. "My daughter brought me cookies every Christmas. I used them as coasters. Turns out they were worth $340 million. I should have tasted them sooner." Every Sunday morning, I still went to the Montclair Bakery at 5 a.m. Same kitchen, same sourdough starter, now 12 years old and still producing the best bread I'd ever made. Same flour-dusted apron, same quiet satisfaction of creating something real with my hands. Marcus visited sometimes. He'd sit at the counter with a coffee and a pastry and watch me work. He never offered business advice anymore. He just watched. And occasionally, when a customer would ask who owned the bakery, He'd look at me with an expression that mixed pride with the permanent sting of having been wrong, and say 4 words that were worth more to me than any franchise deal. That's my sister Lily. Because the truth about cookies and hotel kitchens and backup plans is this: the people who dismiss what you're building are almost always measuring it against the wrong scale. They see a bakery and think small. They see flour on your hands and think limited. They see a woman standing behind a counter at 5 a.m. and assume she has nowhere better to be. They never consider that the counter might be hers, that the bakery might be an empire, that the flour on her hands built something their spreadsheets couldn't contain. And sometimes, the best thing you can bake isn't bread or cookies or sourdough. It's the look on your brother's face when Food Network calls during Christmas dinner and he realizes the failing little bakery feeds a nation.